Can you solve this math challenge? Here's the question. Simplify I raised to 2022 plus I raised to 2023 plus I raised to 2024 plus I raised to 2025 all over 1 plus I, wherein I equals square root of -1. You can pause this video if you want to give this problem a try. Now, let's answer this question together. So, our basic goal in this video is to simplify this expression involving I, wherein this I equals square root of -1. Now, there are many ways to answer this kind of question, but here's one possible way. So, first thing to do is to focus on these two terms, I raised to 2022 plus I raised to 2023. And take note that 2023 can be written as 1 plus 2022. Now, let's use some laws of exponent. If we have b raised to n plus m, it is equivalent to b raised to n times b raised to the power of m. Therefore, this I raised to 1 plus 2022 can be written as I raised to 1, or just I, times I raised to 2022. Now, notice that we have a common term of I raised to 2022. So, we can factor this expression, I raised to 2023. So, this will give us I raised to 2022 multiplied by 1 plus I. Now, basically, we will do the same thing in these two terms, I raised to 2024 plus I raised to 2025. And take note that 2025 is just 1 plus 2024. Now, this expression right here can be written as I raised to 1, or just I, times I raised to 2024. Again, we have a common factor of I raised to 2024, so we can factor this expression. So we have I raised to 2024 times 1 plus I. Now, take note or notice that we have a common factor again, which is I plus 1. So we can factor out I plus 1. This will give us I plus 1 multiplied by I raised to 2022 plus I raised to 2024 all over 1 plus I. And now, we can now cancel out 1 plus I on the numerator and 1 plus I on the denominator. So this will give us I raised to 2022 plus I raised to 2024. Now, how are we going to evaluate this kind of expression? Now, let's use the given that it says that I equals square root of -1. Now, what will happen if we square both sides? This will give us I squared equals square root of -1 quantity squared, or simply, this is -1. So, I squared must be -1. Now, what will happen if we multiply both sides by I? The left-hand side of our equation is just I cubed, and the right-hand side is just -I. So, if we have I means square root of -1, I squared is -1, I cubed is -I, and how about I raised to the 4th power? So, let's multiply both sides again by I. Now, the left-hand side is just I raised to the 4th power, and the right-hand side is just -I squared, and we know I squared is -1. Now, negative of -1 is just +1. Now, we can see some patterns here. If we get the value of I raised to the 5th power, this is just equivalent to just I. Now, if we get the value of I raised to the 6th power, this is just the same thing as I squared, which is equal to -1. And now, if we keep going, I raised to 7th power is the same thing as I cubed, or simply -I. And I raised to the 8th power is the same thing as I raised to the 4th power, or simply 1. So the pattern continues. So I raised to the 9th power is the same thing as I raised to the 5th power, and the same thing as I. I raised to the 10th power is the same thing as I raised to the 6th, and I squared, which is -1. I raised to 11 is the same thing as I raised to 7 and I cubed, which is -I. And I raised to 12th power is the same thing as I raised to 8 and I raised to the fourth power, which is equal to 1. And the pattern continues. Therefore, we can say that I raised to 2021 is the same thing as I raised to 2022 is the same thing as I squared, which is negative 1. I raised to 2023 is the same thing as I raised to 7, and I raised to cube, or simply equal to negative I. And the last one, I raised to 2024 is the same thing as I raised to 8, and I raised to the fourth power, which is 1. Now at this point, we can now evaluate this expression right here, because we know that I raised to 2022 is just negative 1, and I raised to 2024 is just 1. So this is just negative 1 plus 1, or simply 0. Therefore, our answer to this question, the value of this expression right here is simply 0. And as always, we are done. Now, let's have the generalization of this kind of problem. If we have I raised to n plus I raised to n plus 1 plus I raised to n plus 2 plus I raised to n plus 4, this is automatically equal to 0. Therefore, going back to our expression right here, we have here 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. We have 4 consecutive integers. Therefore, the numerator is definitely equal to 0. So 0 over any number must be 0. That's why the answer is 0. And we're done.